Would you like to create AI-powered dynamic narrative elements for your games? Well, you've come to the right place. Welcome to this tutorial where I'm going to show you how to integrate ChatGPT into Unreal Engine. Now, this is really great if you want to introduce kind of like dynamic narrative elements, things that can be changed by the player, things that people interact with, without having to pre-write loads of dialogue or loads of kind of copy for the game. We can plug ChatGPT in, the ChatGPT API, into Unreal Engine and then access that in real time in a bunch of interesting ways. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to set that up and then a couple of interesting ways of how to use it as well. So let's get started. First up, we need the plugin. So we go to the marketplace and then we search for GPT. And there'll be a few things, but the one we want is this one, HTTP GPT, and then we'll install that to the engine. I've actually already got it installed to the engine I'm going to use, so I don't need to do that, but we can then go to our library and then launch Unreal Engine. Cool. Okay, we're going to make a new project. We're going to use the third person template for this, and I'm going to call this GPT project. I'm going to create that. Cool. So we've got our project here. We're just going to quickly hit play just to make sure everything's working, which it is. This is just our normal third person thing. I'll just drag that down so we've got the full amount of space. And that's great. So the first thing we need to do is go to edit and plugins, and then we'll bring the plugins over here so you can see them. And we'll search for GPT, which will show up with this one. And we need to enable this. We'll get a message saying integration is beta, that's fine. And then a thing to restart it. And we do need to restart the editor. Cool, it is now enabled. There's one other thing we have to do, and I should have really mentioned this at the beginning, but you do need access to the ChatGPT API. So if we search for that, ChatGPT API reference, it'll ask you to log in if you haven't already made an account and not logged in yet. So we'll go to that, which is fine. We need to go to our dashboard, and then here under API keys, we need to create a new secret key. I'm going to call this GPT Unreal. And that's fine. Create a secret key. And then we copy that key. When you're making these keys, like, it's important you do keep these secret. They're called secret keys for a reason. If anyone gets hold of your key and you're using it for an app or anything else, they can just be using your account basically. So another thing to mention is you do need to have like your billing set up on this. Like, I think at this point, it used to be you just got charged for what you use, but now you have to buy credits for ChatGPT to use the API for every call that you do. It's not very much per call. It adds up depending on what kind of app you're using. So it's up to you to kind of choose like how much you want to use or whether this is, you know, what the pricing model is going to be going forward. But I will just mention that mine's already set up with that, so I don't really need to do it. And I've just realized I'm probably going to have to use a different key because I'm going to do probably a bit more copy and pasting. Actually, no, it's fine. I've copied my key. Let's go back into Unreal and start setting things up. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is just test it out, really. So what I like to do with any project, this is just a general tip really, is to make a new folder and call this GPT project in my sort of main content folder. I like to just sort of color it just so I know like that's my stuff that I'm using. I'm pressing Control and Space, by the way, to get this content browser up. We'll go into here and then let's make a new blueprint class of an actor and let's call it GPT agent. And we'll go into here and I'll make this available so you can see it a bit easier. And here we go. We go straight into the event graph. And I'll show you the things we need. So if we type in GPT into the search window, then we have more or less like all of the functions that we have for our GPT things. Most of these you don't need to use. You will in like other use cases if we do more complex stuff. But the main one we're going to use is send messages with custom options. And then we're also going to use GPT, what is it? Set GPT, set common options, and then set chat options. Just because if we do this at the very beginning of this thing, it'll set some of the options that we might have to change every time. So it's simple stuff, but we'll do it. So for this, we'll split that structure out, and we'll split that structure out just so we can get at the things. And this is where we put our key. So our API key goes in there. We don't need to change the other stuff. The value of the model, I would change that to GPT-4. I don't know if this is like actually related to the models that are available. I've tested it recently, and I have a feeling the GPT-4 one is using like one of the newer turbo models. It's much faster than it used to be. So even though it's not showing some of the newer models like 4.0 in there, I believe that it probably is doing what we need it to. Don't change any of these now. I'll explain kind of what they do in a bit. But yeah, don't change those for now. Let's just leave that as is. And then we can start hooking this stuff up. So the way that this works is those are kind of set now, so that's fine. We've got our messages and we've got functions. We're just going to use messages for now. And this is kind of the module that we're going to use. Like this is the function basically that we're going to use to get responses back from the ChatGPT model. So this is our messages that we're going to send it. And I'll probably show you this actually back on the, let's go to the playground. And this is back on your kind of like ChatGPT thing. We send it a bunch of messages in order to get a response, and then we add those messages back to the array of messages to then get further responses for it to know that it's got history. By default, ChatGPT doesn't have any history. When you're using like the chat interface, like the web interface, and you're chatting with it, this is what it's doing basically. It's adding each message onto that big array, and it's reading it every time to give you the response. That's called context. That's your context window. So we've got to build that to begin with. We don't get that for free when we're using the API. So you start with a system message. You say, you are a helpful assistant. And then we do a user message to say, you are a helpful assistant that talks like a pirate. There we go. I'm going to add that to that, and then we're going to change it to assistant, which is fine. Okay. Great. So this is where I'm like pretending I'm sort of giving it a pre-message. So to pretend that it's kind of sent that, so it kind of knows like what to use. Fire away. There you go. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to send like a user message to say, hello, how are you? And then we're going to run that. And then we'll get a message back. Ahoy there, matey. I'm doing just fine. Sailing the vast sea of information. How you doing on this fine day? So this is what we're going to recreate basically in Unreal, is this kind of system user. That should have been assistant. Actually, I should have added it as assistant. So we'll make sure we do that in here. But what we'll do is we'll go make array, because we want to have an array of these messages. We're going to add 3 pins, which are our 3 messages, and we're going to go make. So our first one needs to be system, and the content of that is, you are a helpful assistant, and then we're going to copy and paste that. We're going to do a user message for our second one. You are a helpful assistant that talks like a pirate. And then we're going to do another one here, which is going to be the assistant, and we're going to say far away. So it sort of knows that it's waiting for a message. So these are like the messages, or these are like the initial messages. So actually what we're going to do is we're going to promote this to a variable, and we're going to go messages. And actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this up here, because this is like stuff that we want to have. Oops. Like when we're setting up the whole chat, basically. So these are like the initial messages. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a message on there as like a first message to say, hello there, or something like that. So we'll get our messages, we'll go add, and then we'll go make. And that's the user, and we go, hello, how are you? And then we'll hook that up to here. We'll get our messages. And so, yeah, and we'll do this on the begin play as well. But usually we would find some other way of triggering this, basically. So what it's doing is we've made these 3 messages as like setup, And then after that, usually by another means, is we add on this other message via like chat or whatever, and then we give it those 4 messages. So crucially, the last message we've sent it is a user message, so it knows that it needs to have a response, and the response will come out of here. Now, there's quite a lot of outputs to these. The only 2 that you really want to use are this process completed and progress updated. Process complete is like your final message. The progress updated is like when it's kind of writing out the message, because the way ChatGPT works is that it's working on the next what's called token, which is kind of a word or part of a word or a syllable, and it's basically just working out what the best next one of those to use is. That's literally what it's doing. So when it's writing it out, it's kind of thinking as it's going, and that is useful if you want to kind of write things out and not have to wait for the full message. But what I like to do is put in some print stuff here. So we go print string, and we're going to go this one. We're going to go GPT started. This is just for debugging, but it is really helpful to have this stuff, and GPT error. And we're going to go progress started. We're going to send that to our GPT started. Request failed and error received. We'll send there. And then this is, this is like the actual one that will come out. So what we'll do is we will break this response, because the response comes with like loads and loads of stuff. Namely, like more than one response. Sometimes you can set it to have like multiple responses, which you can then choose from later. We're only going to take the first one because we only want one of them. So we're going to get a copy at 0, which is fine. And then we're going to break that out. And then this is actually where we're going to get our message. And even then it's not a string, that's actually the message. But what we can do at this point, which is quite helpful, let's just move this down here. Is we'll just test it actually at this point. Let's go process completed, print string, and let's make this last like 20 seconds and make it like green as well, so it's slightly different. And then split struct bin, and then we're going to message content from there. Cool. So this should work. If we play our game, it should work. But the first thing we need to do is actually put this in our scene. We need the we need to have that ChatGPT agent actually in the scene for it to do anything. So let's go play in editor. There we go. GPT error. I have a feeling it does that the first time. If I stop that and play it again. Okay, now there is a GPT error. So let's figure out why it's doing that. For some reason, I think maybe it doesn't know that it's got the key basically. So we just right click on that, split structure, and now it should work. Yeah, we just move our stuff out. So yeah, there we go. ChatGPT started. GPT started is the second one. Arr, matey, I be shipshape in Bristol fashion, ready for helping you on this fine day. Going to be assisting you with. So it's working. Like we've got our agent in there. We're sending our first message, and that seems to be working. So I'll leave it there as like an end of part 1, and then the next part we'll kind of implement that in a slightly more interesting way, shall we say.